All right, so I see we have so many folks already in the call and all of our folks here joining as our speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, my name is Melanie. Welcome and thank you all for taking time out of this sunny Sunday to join us for this not so sunny, but yet crucial organizing call. We believe this is a uniquely urgent and emergency time to bridge hostage organizing and ceasefire organizing for an immediate end to the violence. We all wish we do not have to be here today, but the circumstances require anyone of conscience to speak up and speak out, particularly at this juncture where Israelis have made it clear they too need this war to end now. For far too long, the left of Israel has been ignored by potential movements who could be their allies, but have chosen along the way to ignore and discredit them. Even Israelis who have proven to be anti-occupation often don't pass the litmus test of Western progressive. As a result, when Israelis took to the streets this past week, at first, no one seemed to give them the credit for the efforts to get a ceasefire-hostage deal done, even if it means bringing their country to its knees. Last night, our families of the Begin Gate protest, all hostages, led the streets in what is the hardest push yet and the largest outpouring into the streets in the existence of the state of Israel. The people are screaming as loud as they can, so the rest of the world will know Israeli people need help to get this tyrannical government to end the war. Even the average Israeli recognizes the extreme danger that this ongoing war is creating for all its citizens, not to mention the anti-Semitism that it spikes worldwide. It is only violent terrorists like Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich who have prevented this war now from ending, or not only, but just imagine last night in the streets across the country, there was the equivalent of what would be 15 million Americans out in the protest, if compared in proportion of protesters and population size. The only people who don't want this to end are the maniacal leaders as Sinwar and Bibi, and even the US military-industrial complex that inevitably plays a role here. Regardless of political affiliation, Israelis need the help of global movements outside of just the Jewish diaspora to help them raise this call for ceasefire and hostage deal. We need to build this bridge, the movements here and the movements of the people in the land calling for a deal. If we cannot find a way to work towards this critical goal of stopping the bloodshed and the absolute crisis that Gazans are experiencing, then we will have failed in all of our duties to the babies and everyone and all of our allies, whether that be in your mind, Israelis or Palestinians. So this is why we are here for this unique moment where we hope our missions will align to fight like hell to get this deal done and the bloodshed to stop. This is why our families of all hostages have called on you to hear them and to see them and their pleas and join their struggle to end the war now. As a Jewish American anti-occupation activist with deep roots in the solidarity and legacy Jewish spaces, it has been my privilege to serve these families as a strategy advisor and friend over these last few months, several months. Their resilience and love for their own family members can keep anyone inspired to keep going despite how awful it is. I'm eager to see the alliances we can start from this day forward. That is why we have brought here today these following speakers. We have first Zahiro, family member of hostage Abidor Munder, murdered while in captivity, and one of the leaders of the Begin Gate protests. Then we will hear from Tamar, an Israeli living in the US, one of the leaders of the New York City Israelis for Peace, and someone very experienced in the absolute devastation of the losses that were experienced on 10/7. Then we will hear from Adnan, a committed solidarity activist who I believe recently returned from a visit to the region and who will share some perspectives from the ground right now. Then we will hear from Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, born and raised in Gaza, now living in the US, who has spent the last 11 months trying to build alliances where possible to get the war to end, having lost much of his own family, friends, and childhood home to the brutality of this war. He will share a perspective on how solidarity can look potentially moving forward. In conclusion, we will hear from Eliana of the Halachic Left, a leader in the American Jewish organization of observant Jews who are committed to this shared fight. And she will share some perspectives of being an American Jew amidst the streets of Israel right now and those calling for a deal. And in wrap up, Tamara, an Israeli leader with Israelis for Peace and the anti-occupation movement of Israelis, will guide us on some immediate action steps you can take right in and after this call to help us get this hostage ceasefire deal done. Thank you all once again for taking your time to be here with us. Without a further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Zahiro. Thank you.
So, hi everyone. Can you guys hear me? Everyone?
Yes, we hear you. We
Okay.
hear you. Yes.
So, yeah, I turned off the video because unfortunately, I'm on the streets. I'm on my way to the daily demonstration on beggings. So I'll be brief and give my perspective. Yesterday was a truly uplifting night. There was an amazing amount of people, multitude of people, flocking from every direction to Begin Gate, and it was for us. It was, like kind of a sad kind of victory because we have been waiting for the masses to come for so long, and I think maybe they are starting to do so. Last week was also very big in terms of number of people taking out to the streets and shouting, anti-government slogans all over, and the slogans were getting harsher and harsher every week, and we hear things that we didn't hear like 2 or 3 months ago now are prevalent in our demonstrations. Now, um, the even though there was this huge amount of people on the streets, the media coverage for this is lacking, and the whole point of the people going to the streets and affecting public opinion is is encountering very, very powerful forces that are turned against us, mainly from the government and the prime minister's office. That's how it's called. Who is waging a psychological war against us, against the hostage families that are willing to speak, that are not, playing in line, playing along with the government rhythm. Uh, should I introduce myself briefly? Okay, so hi for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm Zahiro. My Shahar is my official name. Everyone calls me Zahiro. I'm the nephew of Abraham Munder, who was brought back from Gaza 2 weeks ago in a body bag after being dead there for who knows how many months. My auntie Ruth, he was 79. He was almost 80 years old. He was taken on October 7th, separately from my aunt and my cousin and their only grandson, who was 9 years old at the time. The three of them were released in the first day of the hostage deal. He stayed there, and apparently he was killed slash died anywhere between February and April. We don't know. And his body was retrieved 2 weeks ago. We buried him. His son, the only son, my cousin Roy, who was 50 years old, was murdered in front of his house. They all lived in Kibbutz Niroz. Um, and I've been advocating for this more activist, this more anti-government, I think, from day one, even from day zero. And together with many, many beautiful people that joined me in this endeavor, we formed the Begin group, the Begin Gate group, and it's a grassroots movement. There's no leaders, there's no, just everyone is pushing the best he can, and we are all striving for the same cause. And along the line, along the road, along the way, we found out that there are so many, as I said, powerful forces acting against us, smearing us in social media and in television, in national television. And we are trying to stay strong and keep our beliefs and keep our human point of view on top of Israeli public opinion. And it's a hard battle. It's an uphill battle, and we need every help we can get, because basically when we go outside of Israel, within Israel, everybody knows what we're talking about. Everybody knows that Benjamin Netanyahu is selling lies to everyone that everyone that hears. He just wanted to please. There's no real essence in what he says. You can't really trust his words. And when he says that he's striving to get the hostages back, nobody in Israel believes him. Even his own camp, his own base, they don't believe him. We know that this is, just paying lip service to the hostage family. And his government and he himself has been torpedoing every initiative to end this issue. And this is the situation we are, now. It's amazing. Like 11 months after the attack, more than 11 months after the most gruesome and, the worst military failure in Israel history, everyone that were in charge at the time is still in power. Nobody stepped down from office. Not the IDF chief, not the ministers, prime minister, no one. And this is the case. They are building the case for perpetual, endless war. First Gaza, then Lebanon, maybe the West Bank, and
Zahiro, I'm gonna chime in here. And one thing I think that everyone here would really love to hear from you is, from your perspective, what is the most important message you want this audience to hear, and what you and the families really need from allies, especially here in the US?
Okay, that's easy. Make the distinction between the government and the people. The people want peace. The people want the hostages. The government is in some strange interlock with the most fundamental and most extreme undercurrents of Israel's society. They keep in power, although the vast majority of Israelis want to end this situation and want an end to this and stopping the war. And we understand that in order to end the hostage situation, this is part of ending the war. And this is the most important message we need to get across, because people are supporting Israel, but supporting Israeli people is more important. We are now in the most, the most difficult time in Israel history, and the forces for fighting, trying, struggling for peace, for a peaceful solution to this situation, need any help they can get. And the American Jewish communities that support Israel, no matter what, are actually in the long run harming us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the message we need to get across. Okay, stop
Thank
this
you, Zahiro.
automatic siding of every Israeli action. But by all means, stop arming Israel. The bomb that maybe, maybe we don't know for sure, and probably we will never know. But the bomb that the vapors, the CO gas from the bomb that killed the CO that killed that. Okay, there are two options: either the captors killed my uncle, or he died from CO vapors resulting from an American bomb. Okay, there is a chance an American bomb killed my uncle. Stop arming Israel.
Yeah, and that's such an important message that we all really need to hear. And I think it's so much more powerful when this audience in particular hears that message coming from such an important voice like yours, Zahiro. I know you are out on your way over to tonight's protest, so I want to give you a chance to get off and go on to where you need to be and pass it over to Tamar. So if you have any just last comments before Tamar will take it away for us, I just also want to thank you for all that you do and the inspiration you give me every day to keep going, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Melanie. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I hope my message got across, and I hope everyone on this call can find within himself the ways to act upon this message, because we are, as I said, the situation is, we're calling all stations. We need every help we can get. Thank you very much. I'm on my way. So
Thank you,
I'll drop
Zahiro.
off now, but thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Tamar.
Okay. First, I want to say that I answered something on the chat and then I stopped answering because it's impossible to hear the other speakers and do that, but I will pick up on that once we're done. So my name is Tamar Glezerman. I'm one of the co-founders of Israelis for Peace. My background is that I'm from Tel Aviv. I moved here about 14 years ago. The past 8 years at this point, I've been running a small micro donation program in Gaza with a few friends that I met there beforehand online. And I'm still in touch with them throughout this. We're still doing this to the best of our abilities. Another thing about my background is that on October 7th, I have a lot of family in Be'eri, and on October 7th, my aunt was murdered by Hamas. She was 88. And pretty soon after that, I started with Israelis for Peace with Tamara and a few other people organizing protests in New York for ceasefire and hostage release, for the very simple reason that we couldn't find a place for us in the existing protests. Weren't ready to forget 2 million Palestinians or 200 hostages, and that was demanded of us and what was offered to us at the beginning. So that's how we came up with just creating a space for people to come protest every weekend and know that they are holding basically the concept of humanity at heart and not necessarily tribalism, which is the big pull right now. So that's my background. And I wanted to say, first of all, thank you to everyone on this chat who is not Israeli, who is here to listen and to work together. It is so important and so crucial, and kind of what we've been trying to say from the get-go, which is there are people on the ground working for the better future that everyone is demanding, and these are the people who need to be supported. Because the people who are going to build this amazing new future that we're all pushing for are not from Brooklyn. So the people on the ground, whether in Gaza, in the West Bank, or inside of Green Line Israel, who are working for this better future are the ones who need our support. And what Americans can do now is to be a broken record and to separate this weird perception here amongst American Jewry that asking for the release of the hostages means bombing Gaza, which it's also like, and it just doesn't add up in any way, but that's become the consensus. Whereas in Israel, seal the deal means end the war. It's the same thing. And we've been harping on that since the moment we conjugated for our first thing. It is the same thing. It comes from the same values, but also in practicality, it is the same thing. And the more people we can get on our side to support that here, to support people on the ground there, the better. And in my perception right now, there's a really weird distinction between what the international community on the left I'm speaking of right now thinks its role is. And I see a lot, like on a personal level, a few days ago, which I think is like a good example for this, sort of bringing it up. I was on Twitter and everybody and their mother were sharing this podcast in English of two Israelis that say horrible genocidal stuff. And I had responded to that, saying that basically pointing out that it's not the international community's role to decide or prove that Israelis are bad or the Palestinians are bad. The international community's role is to see how they can help forces that want better on the ground. Which is exactly why I think this kind of thing is really, really important. And again, the changing of the dialogue, the separating Israelis from their government. And this is not to say that there's not a horrific racism problem in Israel, that the public zeitgeist is something that I support. But the international community's role is to support the forces that are working for better, whether in our language or in our actions. And this is a special time to do that, although any point would have been a good time to do that, is because last night we saw over 500,000 people on the streets of Israel, of Tel Aviv. And I think there's a kind of a well-known study in the book Why Nonviolence Works, Why Nonviolence Resistance Works, that says once over 3.5% of the populace are out on the streets, the government can't survive. We got over 5% yesterday. So now is a great time for the rest of the world, or people who care or who want a better, just, and secure future for Palestinians and Israelis alike, to kind of, link arms with us and amplify that wherever they might be. That's, I think, pretty much my intro, unless there are any questions.
Thank you so much. Maybe if people have questions, maybe we can put some stuff in chat, and as we go, we can try to answer things or come to it at the end, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so Tamar, thank you so much. And now we're gonna move over to Adnan, and I'm gonna let Adnan introduce himself.
Thank you. Good to speak to you all. My name is Adnan Jaber, born and raised in Jerusalem. I moved to Los Angeles a year ago. I am proud husband of Michal Greenfield. I met her in a program in Israel called Tech to Peace, brings Palestinians and Israelis to learn tech together and dialogue with each other. Right now, speaking to you from San Francisco Airport. So I'm sorry if there's any noise. We need a hostage deal and a ceasefire now. Yes, we know that. I have been in many dialogues with high profiles on the opposition to that. And I asked them why you don't want to call for that now. And they tell me if all the Israelis speak against the Israeli government and there are no Palestinians speaking against Hamas, this will make it really hard. I understand, but why Palestinians don't speak against Hamas? I can tell you from my perspective that challenge. First, Gazans, if they speak against Hamas, they are tortured and killed. In the West Bank, if they speak against Hamas, there's occupation over their head and settler violence. And if they speak against Hamas, it might seem for them as they are siding with Israel. And that's really hard for them to do. So people need to understand that on the Israeli center and right. They need to understand if Palestinians spoke against Hamas, it's hard, very hard for them to do it while there's continuous settler violence and occupation. And I think that message needs to be explained in the protests in Tel Aviv and in the Jewish communities in the US and around the world. They need to understand that. So what can we do when we're stuck in this situation? We need Palestinian internal dialogue. Very important. Debates, factions to speak with each other, young people. We need civil society organizations to be strengthened in Palestine. Human organizations, the peace organizations like Roots, like Tech to Peace, like ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace, which is an umbrella for 180 peace organizations in Israel, Palestine. the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Google it, look at all the organizations, find the one that you like and support it. And we need to strengthen the Palestinian voices like Ahmed Khatib, who take the courage to speak bravely about this. There's a challenge about funding the civil society organizations. I ask the world leaders, why don't you do it now? Why don't you put all your focus? They say it's important. Yes, we need support, but we cannot do it first. We need to do the political solution, which is a two-state or whatever it is, and then we can work with civil society. But we're stuck. We're stuck, and we need to work in that now, as we're working on political solutions. Recently, there has been at the G7 meeting a new commitment the world leaders has shared for the first time, that they're committed. For the first time, they're committed to support civil society organizations. Now we need to hold them responsible to execute on that as soon as possible. And I think the American leadership can take a big role in leading that. I have been advocating in DC for that. But again, they keep telling me that we cannot do this unless there's a political solution first. And I see the movement that calls for stopping the weapons that goes to Israel. And this movement needs to be more specific about offensive weapons versus defensive weapons. They need to speak that language a little bit better so they don't get all this resistance against them. And I have spoken with some people and they explained to me it's easier if you ask for extra money to be sent for civil society organizations rather than taking money from the money sent to Israel. So we can focus our energies on things that can actually take us to the next step. So I'm asking all the people that call for arms embargo to make it their second or their third call, and make their first call is supporting civil society organizations and allocating fund for that. That can take us to the next step that we really all want to go to, in my opinion. Thank you for giving me the space. I think Ahmed will elaborate much more and say it in a more dramatic way, and I appreciate him a lot.
Thank you, Adnan.
Thank you.
I guess I'm up next. Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmed. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, about to relocate to DC actually in 3 hours, which is why I look and feel like a zombie, packing and getting ready while also dealing with the horrors of what's happening back home. I was able to get some of my family out of Gaza. Some remained behind. I lost dozens of them in this current war. And so I have been putting myself out there since October 7th to try and build bridges across the divide lines, if you will, across the entrenched narratives, across the seeming breakdown of all abilities to hold multiple truths on multiple sides. And I am speaking as somebody who speak for myself. I don't represent or claim to represent anybody. I don't claim to speak on anybody's behalf but myself. But having grown up in Gaza, having family there throughout my time here in the United States, since I got political asylum, I became a citizen 10 years ago. My family, immediate and extended, largely remained back there. And I was involved in Gaza's affairs. I actually launched an organization to build a humanitarian airport in Gaza, an internationally run, Israeli-approved airport to facilitate the freedom of movement. And so this issue has not only been near and dear to me, but I have kept close contact with what's happening in Gaza and the occurrences on the ground. And my brother, who is the deputy director, he's been involved in the humanitarian community for over 15 years. He has now fallen severely ill due to a hepatitis A infection that's ravaging the local population due to the spread of disease, of the lack of sanitation, due to the horrors and awful conditions on the ground. And so solidarity and building solidarity. I mean, one of the things that has been really frustrating with trying to work with not just, I mean, and I'm somebody who has generally been very left-leaning my entire life, and I worked in the mainstream, what you would call pro-Palestine solidarity movements up until many years ago, is that there has not been a willingness, and I'm speaking on our side, if you will, there's not been a willingness to see the hostage families as true partners in getting this war to end. This is how I met so many in DC about a month ago, a little over a month ago, when we were there to protest Netanyahu's visit. But it was very clear that, as Tamar said earlier, seal the deal was always said in unison with end the war. End the war. It wasn't ceasefire, it wasn't pause, it was end the war. And so I've been frustrated to see that there's no willingness to work with hostage families and to view them by a lot of the Palestine solidarity folks, or by a lot of the leftist folks, to really see them as as an actual partner, in a viable partner, a sincere partner in getting this war to end. I've been frustrated by the treating of the Palestinians as an all unified, monolithic, singular group without any nuance. The same folks who regularly tell us that people of color are very diverse and they're not monolithic, they're not singular, have been regularly treating the Palestinians as a singular, monolithic group. And so how does that manifest? It manifests in not acknowledging that there are a lot of pro-Palestine folks who are extraordinarily anti-Hamas for serving our people on a platter to the most right-wing, insane government in Israel's history. There are so many Palestinians who, in Gaza right now, I speak to them daily, who are wanting the war to end at all costs. And at the same time, they're terrified of how this war is going to end, and no one is talking about, on our side, not Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich, but on the solidarity activism side, no one is talking about, can this war end in a way that initiates political transformation in Gaza without allowing Hamas to go back to running our lives, without allowing Hamas to go back to being in charge? And so one of the ways in which we can have solidarity with across different communities is to acknowledge that Palestinians are not monolithic. As Adnan said, it is exceptionally difficult to speak out against Hamas. They shoot them in the knees, they torture them, they kill them, they go after them. But also, there are so many Palestinians who don't want to be seen as basically being on Israel's side by speaking out against Hamas. And unfortunately, some of our good, well-intending folks, including even those in leftist spaces in within the Jewish community, have kind of reinforced that instead of creating the space. When I try to come in and say, look, I want to work with hostage families, I support a ceasefire, that doesn't mean I support Hamas staying in power. I support ending Hamas's rule, but that doesn't mean I support the bombardment. When I try to have those nuanced conversations, I am regularly shut down by a lot of leftist spaces, by a lot of leftist activists, because that is seen as, oh, well, this is actually too controversial, or this is not true expression of solidarity, or somehow I am the unicorn within the Palestinian community. And so I want us to sincerely and genuinely train ourselves to, when somebody I'm talking to my Jewish allies and friends, say it as part of the script, as part of the vision, as part of the idea that when we call for a ceasefire to end the war and bring the hostages home, that does not mean we're saying we want the status quo to return to October 6th. There can totally be space for a ceasefire, and this is what I say, that initiates political transformation. We don't know all the tenets of this political transformation and what it looks like, but one that does not allow Hamas to threaten Israel in the future, one that does not also allow Hamas to hold the Palestinian people in Gaza hostage to its destructive programs. And so that can absolutely reside under the umbrella of ceasefire and hostage deal. So that's number one. Number two is, please understand that even if you're not hearing a lot of very strong anti-Hamas voices in the diaspora community, or visibly on the ground in Gaza, ones that the international media picks up on, there are immensely diverse Palestinian perspectives. They're all unified in wanting to end the war immediately, stop the killing, and stop the suffering, and stop the hunger and the horror and all the evils that the people are experiencing. But the Palestinian people are not monolithic. These polls, I didn't need the IDF to say they found documents that Hamas falsified the results of the polls. I knew that they were fraudulent from the get-go because it defies the norm. It defies logic. The people of Gaza are turning in mass against Hamas, just like the people of Israel are turning in mass against Netanyahu. So afford us the same kind of degree of nuance and the same kind of like diversity that you see within Israel. And then finally, is I think there really is an opportunity right now with within an electoral context to come up with a set of concrete, specific, highly tangible examples, calls rather, for what an incoming Harris administration can do. And I think it's very easy to get a commitment to sanction the settlers and sanction Ben Gvir and Smotrich. It's very easy to push in parallel with a ceasefire in Gaza. We have to address settler violence in Gaza, because that in the West Bank, because that will absolutely trigger another horrendous episode, worse than what we're seeing right now if the Palestinian Authority collapses. I personally, as much as I may have my own beliefs, I don't believe that it is helpful to call for a broad arms embargo on Israel for pragmatism and practicality purposes. It might be specific to this war context. It might be specific to pressuring Netanyahu, but to say cut off all US foreign aid to Israel, I don't believe that that is achievable or tangible at this moment. And so I wonder if it would be a potential distraction and a waste of time rather than being highly specific in support the end of the war, or else and put specific sanctions on weapons to this war, not weapons to all of Israel, but weapons to this war, what the UK did. So I hope that makes sense. But I really do appreciate the space. I appreciate the alliances with the Jewish community. I know there are also a lot of other Palestinians and leftist spaces who want to be a part of this, but it is difficult because it's like, oh, like I'm working with hostage families. Does that mean I support the bombardment? And I absolutely don't believe that. I see the hostage families as absolutely sincere allies. And that's why I'm honored to stand with them. And I'm really sorry for their suffering. And saying that doesn't lessen the suffering of my family, or doesn't take away, rather, the suffering of my family. My mom's homeless. My brother is sick. All of my aunts and uncles on my mom's side were killed. I lost 29 of them in one fell swoop in a raid that destroyed my house. And yet that horror is precisely what motivates me to want to break away from the vicious cycle of violence, revenge, incitement, rinse and repeat. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Ahmed, and before Adnan. With a deep breath, I'm going to turn it now over to Eliana to share her perspectives, and then we'll go into some action steps. And we may have some time for questions, so keep putting questions in the chat that we hopefully will address as we go on. Thank you, Eliana.
Awesome. Thanks. Hello, everybody. And thank you to all who came before me. I'm sure I speak for many of us when I say all of your words were incredibly moving. So I'm Eliana Padwa. I'm an American Jewish activist with Halachic Left, and I'm spending this year in Jerusalem, where I'm doing anti-war and Palestine solidarity activism on the ground. Last Sunday, Jerusalem woke up after a night of protesting to the absolutely horrific news that the bodies of 6 hostages had been discovered, and that they had been alive painfully recently, surviving in captivity for almost 11 months before being murdered. We took to the streets again, immediately. That day, 1 week ago, I sat arm in arm with Israelis at a major Jerusalem intersection blocking traffic. I was wearing the iconic Not in Our Name shirt, the activist on my right wore a Fight Apartheid shirt, and the woman on my left was decked out in the equally iconic Bring Them Home Now apparel. And in the lull before the police picked us up and roughly threw us onto the sidewalk, I joked to her, it's funny because in New York, you'd be calling me Hamas. And I'm not trying to make light of it, right? Of course, radical activists are often called unlike any that I've experienced in the United States. One only has to look at the horrific death of Aishanur, an American activist killed at a peaceful protest, to understand that this is no haven. So I don't want to pretend that there's not fault lines here. I don't want to give credit where it's not due. I know that many of the people protesting here might have really big disagreements with me about our long-term vision for Israel and Palestine. But the many hostage families are taking the necessary step of including Palestinian livelihood in their activism to return their loved ones and end the war. That's not the movement's main focus. But in my short time here, I've discovered there's a few really key differences between the anti-war and hostage return movements in Israel and those in the US. And those differences have really illuminated for me the path that all of us in the US movement need to take if we want to quickly end the war and build a better future. Here, everyone who is at all center or left or anti-government or pro-hostage return in any way is treating the situation as an absolute emergency. There is no business as usual here. The urgent need for hostage return is not something people are thinking about from their homes and like, oh, like maybe I'll go to a rally. Like, let me check my schedule for next Tuesday. You know, I'll try to clear it up and pencil it in. They are yelling and screaming and shutting down society. With that sense of urgency that I'm experiencing here comes a big setting aside of ideological divisions. They exist, right? As we've mentioned. But in the US, it feels really different. In the US, I always felt like we were all looking for a protest to be perfect and fit our needs before being comfortable joining. There's this prevailing attitude that personal comfort with the speakers being directly on message and the chants all having a hechsher is a prerequisite to joining the movement. We cast aside all of our people power for ideological purity. Here in Israel, as someone on the pretty far left of the political spectrum, I'm often uncomfortable with the bigger events, but I go. And so do all the role models and mentors that have come to meet in the anti-occupation, anti-genocide, and anti-apartheid groups. We might not be happy standing in a cluster of Israeli flags while people sing Hatikva, but we're still showing up night after night after night after night. We're lending our bodies and our voices to this really urgent fight. Radicals and moderates are sitting arm in arm to face off together against the police. Why are we doing this? Because we understand that our combined political pressure has more power than any of us do separately. Ultimately, our immediate goals are the same. Stop the war, stop the death. Let Gaza live, let the hostages live. There is a pluralism here that I have not seen in the United States. Here, we're all clear on who the enemy is, and we are willing to work together. Groups like the Radical Bloc, Omtim Biachad, the Miluim Group, Simon Hamoni, the Women's Protest Bloc, the Hostage Forum, Kulanu Hatufim, and so many more. Everyone comes with their own signs and shirts, but we're all elements of the same protest against the war and the government. We're not oppositional movements. There's really incredibly significant differences between these groups, but these discussions are had at real time, at protests, while exerting combined pressure. People aren't doing a purity check before they enter the fray. And it's really clear to me that people here are able to act first, think later, because they have fully internalized that we need a hostage deal and an end to the war now. Questions that distract people in the US, like, does Israel somehow suddenly need Philadelphia, this place that we hadn't heard of until May? Or like, is it anti-Semitic somehow to call for a ceasefire? Or like, what if it's not Bibi who's blocking a deal, even though every media report says he is? Those are not questions that people here are considering. The answers are clear no's. The Israeli government, I need everyone here to understand this. The Israeli government is public enemy number one on its own streets. Bring them home now, deal now, end the war now is a protest to the Israeli government. It's not an abstract hope divorced from political reality. Walking around Tel Aviv on Monday night, I saw signs with pictures of Bibi proclaiming, because of you, they were murdered. Protesters held signs yelling, yes to a deal, end the war now. On Tuesday night in Yerushalayim, we yelled, Hersh Goldberg, Poland was alive. The blood is on the hands of the bloody government. And we don't want more war. May his memory be a revolution. This clear call for a ceasefire and a hostage deal means Israelis here have by and large been way more open to this idea of the US arms embargo than the hostage return seeking Americans that I'm here to speak to. Israelis understand that their government only listens to the language of force. And from the US, that includes financial force. When I asked someone holding a Biden Stop the War sign to chant for Biden to enact an arms embargo, they said to me in Hebrew, I'm not comfortable yelling that, but here, you can take the microphone, go for it. When I last night wore my Jews Say Stop Arming Israel shirt, Protesters across the political spectrum looked at me. They said, "Can you move your hair so I can read the whole thing? I want to know what you're saying. Let's talk about it." People are curious here about these ideas. They're willing to hear me out. I'm not delusional. I know that unlike me, a lot of people here are open to hearing about an arms embargo because they want a hostage deal. I know that while many of us on this call are clear-sighted and see that safety for Israelis and Palestinians is bound up together with an end of the war and a permanent political resolution, not everyone here feels that way. But every Israeli I've spoken to at protests knows, as the Palestine movement in the US does, that forcing Israel's hand is the only way. I wish Americans in the US who want the hostages home would treat this with the same sense of urgency that people in the land do. So here's some tough love. When, God willing, the hostages are home, the children of Gaza can sleep soundly in their own beds, and there's a lasting future of freedom and security in the region, it will be because of organizers who have loudly and consistently exerted political pressure on their governments, both the Israeli government from Israelis and the American government from Americans. I am so moved by the hostage families who have taken the brave step of calling for a ceasefire on the side of life. And it's time for the entire hostage movement to take that step and to take every step they can to make that a reality. I'm speaking to you as fellow Americans with good hearts looking to do the right thing, and I beseech you, we must be brave in this moment. It's time to go to protests we're not 100% sure about as allies, not as counter-protesters. Americans, let's join the Not Another Bomb campaign. Let's remind Congress and the White House that we have the ability to make Israel listen if we're not afraid to do it. Let's stop supporting the Israeli government in our communities in solidarity with the Palestinians and Israelis who are suffering right now. Let's follow the example of the Israeli labor strike last Monday and consider what economic pressure we can exert to change the situation on the ground. Let's call our reps as individuals and as institutions. Let's make it clear that our votes in November are going to a candidate who is calling for a ceasefire, not someone who is pretending to be a friend to Jews by enabling the Israeli government at its most monstrous. Americans, I am calling on you to join the movement today. Fighting for a hostage deal and a ceasefire is the most important thing you could possibly be doing. When you look back on this moment in 20 years, you don't want to see yourself hesitating, holding back. You want to see yourself fighting on the side of life. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And I hope everyone heard it as impactfully as I did. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tamara, and we're going to talk more about actual action steps. And frankly, that this is the beginning. I mean, we need to do it fast, but this is the beginning of some new steps that we can all take together. Turning it over. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here on this call with us. I mean, I'm sure I, like all of you, am so grateful, so touched, and so much better informed by all the speakers that we've heard in the past nearly an hour. I'm really honored that they could share their time with us here. So we at Israelis for Peace have been running a protest weekly for nearly a year. We didn't think we'd be here at this point. So if many of you are here because you've seen the protests in Israel, you see people going onto the street and you want to know what you can do, here in New York City, we have a weekly protest. It's every Sunday at Union Square, and you can follow us on our socials. And we have a silent WhatsApp group. Some of you may know, but many of you don't, that Netanyahu himself is coming to speak in front of the US General Assembly on September 26th. So we will also have a protest of a very broad coalition of organizations that will come here to say his message is unacceptable. He is a major partner in torpedoing the deal that has been on the table, as the Begin families have told us repeatedly, since November. So let us force him and force our own government to take that deal. And again, you can follow us on our socials and in our WhatsApp group to find all the details of that. And also, if you're a member of an organization who you would like to see part of this coalition, you can reach out to us and we will try and make it happen, because as Ahmed so eloquently told us, and what we really know from our experience in other issues, we are definitely stronger together. And the fates of these two people are intertwined. That is a fact that everyone has to face, regardless of what the ultimate political solution to this terrible situation is. But we do know that it is a big commitment to suddenly go out on the street, even though we would like to see you this Sunday and every Sunday. We'll be there later today. And also for those of you who are not in New York, we have spurred several related protests in US cities and in Europe. And if you have a group in your city and you don't see a protest like that, you can reach out to us and we will help you with some materials. But what we'd like to do today is we want to say that protesting isn't the only thing that you can do here in the US, because our government is very, very deeply involved and in many ways really largely responsible. And not only because it prefers one side to another, because it really serves unfortunately, our own interests in our own military industrial complex. So one avenue that we have available to all of us is contacting our representatives, contacting our community members, contacting our clergy leaders, contacting the presidents and other leaders of our congregation. We know in the US how important PTAs are. We need to have this issue everywhere. And we need to press on the points here, because we could, as Eliana said, very easily stop this if we wanted to. And right now, first of all, I encourage all of you to have your representatives in your speed dial. But if you don't, we'd like to walk you through a little exercise for the first stage of this, so we can all get comfortable doing this. One of my colleagues is going to put in a link in the chat where you can look up your representatives if you don't know what their phone numbers are. We know it's a Sunday and they're not there, but believe me, they do listen to their messages. And we would encourage you, just like people in Israel have been protesting daily, to make this a daily habit. Wake up in the morning, call a few representatives. I can tell you from experience that the people who work in these offices are very often incredibly nice, and they will get to know you if you do this thoroughly. So can you put the link in the chat so people can find their reps? Great. And so now, if you click into the document, you should be able to see a place where you can look up your rep's phone number. I'd encourage you to do that right now. Take out your phone. We'll give you 20 seconds to do that. And then if we could have the slide back, which has the actual script. Thank you so much. So hopefully you found your first phone number. And, you know, of course you can adopt this, but we'd love you to make a call and leave your first message now. So thank you for everyone who did that with us right now. I hope that felt really great. We would love for you to continue cycling through your reps after this call and seriously call them every day. And there's so many really important people in your community that you can call, right? If you are part of a congregation, please call your faith leaders and the leaders of your congregation. If you're part of other types of associations, labor associations, parent associations, sport associations, please call the leaders of all of that and say, we do not need to benefit from this conflict. What we want to see is a peaceful resolution between these two people. And we know that ending the war, ceasefire, a return of the hostages is the very, very first step. And we are sure that for everyone on that call, that is not a sufficient step. And we will all be here to continue to work on this until there is actual peace and actual equitable agreement in the land for Palestinians and Israelis. So thank you so much for everyone who's been here. We know you have many, many wonderful and important questions, strategic questions, philosophical questions. We hope we've answered some of those. This is only the first call in what we're sure will be a series of calls. We want to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you for being here with us. And we will send out a follow-up email with all of this information. I'm also just putting in specifically the Israelis for Peace contact information in the chat now. Please join us this Sunday. We'll be there in literally a few hours from now. And help all the people on the ground. You know, it's unimaginable what it would be to be a Gazan right now. And it is also horrifying to be a member of the hostage family. And Israelis are answering that call. Let's answer this call with them. So thank you for being here with us. And we hope to see you shortly with more steps. And, you know, let's reverberate this message throughout our communities. Have a wonderful Sunday. Have a great rest of your week. And together we are stronger. Thank you. And have a good afternoon.